Across the 18th century British Empire, the law viewed the monarch as a direct extension of God's own will. This was the principle of the divine right of kings. Power was believed to descend straight from the Almighty to the throne, meaning that to submit to the king was to submit to God himself. The American Revolution shattered this hierarchy. By rejecting British rule, the colonists did more than change their government. They permanently severed the link between divine authority and the state. This created an immediate crisis for the new republic. With the king gone, America had to decide what ultimate authority would hold the country together. The answer to this crisis came from the Enlightenment. Intellectuals like John Locke and Thomas Jefferson argued that society should be guided by human experience and empirical evidence rather than a reliance on the supernatural. Thomas Paine was the primary messenger for these ideas. He was already a hero of the physical revolution, having written the pamphlet Common Sense to advocate for total independence from the British Crown. But in 1794, Paine turned his sights toward a more controversial target. He published The Age of Reason, applying that same ruthless rationality to the Bible and the foundations of Christianity. By attempting to seat human reason on the throne formerly occupied by God, Paine was seen as a threat to the country's stability. His critique was viewed as an attack on the very moral framework that kept the young republic from falling into chaos. Paine's audit focused on the concept of revelation, the idea that God communicates directly with humans. He argued a revelation is valid only to the person experiencing it firsthand. To others, it is hearsay. Because the Bible relies on second-hand accounts, Paine argued it cannot be the Word of God, trusting instead the natural world for reliable evidence of a creator. This logic stripped power from the church and placed the authority to determine truth entirely within the individual mind. The religious establishment launched a fierce counterstrike. Richard Watson, a British Methodist, published a direct defense of the Bible to answer Paine's skepticism. Watson argued that human beings have an innate need for mystery and spiritual fulfillment, a yearning that scientific justification alone cannot satisfy. Clergymen in Virginia took a different path, reframing the natural world as the instrumentality of creation. They claimed that nature wasn't a replacement for God, but was actually God's medium for direct communication with man. The public reaction was even more intense. This 1801 illustration shows Paine being helped by Satan to pull down the pillars of the American government, reflecting the widespread fear that his ideas were blasphemous. This backlash proved that the American public was terrified that removing faith would destroy the social order and the moral foundation of their new nation. Paine's final years were defined by isolation. His reputation was so damaged that enemies fabricated stories of him screaming in horror on his deathbed, supposedly repenting for his blasphemies. This rejection continued even after his death. The Quakers refused Paine's request to be buried in their grounds because he would not renounce his deistic views. He was buried on his own farm, remembered by the press not as a patriot, but as a destructive force. His obituary in the New York Evening Post noted that while he had done some good, he had done much harm. Paine became a pariah, discarded by the citizens he helped liberate, because he pushed the logic of the Enlightenment further than they were willing to go. Despite his lonely death, Paine's ideas took root. The Age of Reason survived its initial condemnation to inspire a growing culture of religious skepticism in the 19th century. This tug-of-war between faith and reason forced the American public to debate the role of religion in a secular democracy. Paine's willingness to endure public hatred helped establish the practical boundaries for modern humanist values, including the freedom of belief and the freedom of the press. This friction didn't break the early republic. It established the lasting tension between individual skepticism and collective faith that still defines American political identity today.